Dante and his guide, Virgil, arrive on the shores of the island mountain of Purgatory, located in the southern hemisphere on Easter morning, 1300. The beginning of this canto, Purgatorio 7, starts with Virgil and Sordello introducing themselves to each other. Accoglienze oneste and liete, glad and gracious welcoming. Like Virgil, Sordello is a poet from Mantova, a city in northern Italy, and by the way, the hometown of the Gonzaga family. But Sordello is from the Middle Ages, the 13th century, a generation or two before Dante, not the period of the Roman Empire in which Virgil is a member. Although they have never met in person, in Canto 7, Sordello knows of Virgil, the great poet of his time. Sordello left Italy and passed through various courts in Spain, France, and Provence. In 1241, he found stable residence in the court of Raymond Berenger, Count of Provence. What's interesting is that Sordello, being from Mantova, his native vernacular language is Italian, which is at the time vulgar Latin. But he wrote in a language not his own, which wasn't a common practice at the time. That language that he wrote in was Provençal, the mother language of Occitan, a dialect currently spoken in France. As an applied linguist of Spanish, Canto 7 is especially interesting. One of the areas that I teach is history of the language, and going back to the times that this was written, the Roman Republic is known to have two vernaculars circulating, among others, specifically that of Vulgar Latin and Classical Latin. Vulgar Latin, also known as popular or common speech or vernacular, is non-literary Latin. At the same time, Vulgar Latin was considered as a sort of corrupted Latin, as it was distinct from the literary Classical Latin. However, Vulgar Latin is the mother language of all of today's Romance languages. The speakers of Vulgar Latin, as they spread through the Roman Empire, adopted practices that encouraged cultural assimilation. And with culture comes linguistics assimilation as well. Languages naturally adapt to their situations of use and reflect the social identities of their speakers. Linguistic variation is inevitable and natural. And while Vulgar Latin naturally adapted and was adopted by the vernaculars it came into contact with, the resulting Tuscan vernacular, which remember is an example of the vulgar or corrupted languages as compared to Classical Latin, eventually became the regional vernacular that was adopted as the natural language of the Italian peninsula due to the prestige it had gained. Applied linguists claim that the issue about linguistic right and linguistic wrong is one on deciding who wields power and who does not. Viewing language as a form of linguistic cultural capital, a term coined by Bordeaux, stigmatized forms such as corrupted or popular vernaculars, as typically those used by social groups other than the educated classes. The beginning of this canto picks up the storyline where it left off in Purgatorio 6, criticizing the various powers that are ruining or corrupting Italy. This canto offers a dialogue and a tribute to Virgil and Sordello for forging a sense of political unity based on a common linguistic base, la lingua nostra. The ironic nature of claiming the Tuscan vernacular as lingua nostra, the prescriptive correct language, continues to be played out today worldwide where two or more vernaculars come into contact. One common example is a newer vernacular of Spanish in the United States. Spanglish is typically described as containing instances of code switching both in English and Spanish. Spanglish is typically looked down upon by the Hispanic intelligentsia and is commonly associated with illiterate, but more and more authors are embracing it as their code of honor and as their chosen medium of expression. For many, code switching, or what prescriptivists may call corrupted language, serves as a bridge connecting Latinx community members of the United States. Code switching becomes available as a resource for the exercise of or resistance to power by virtue of its place in the repertoires of individual speakers, on one hand, and of its position with respect to other forms of language practices in circulation. Linguists generally would argue that the language of educated class speakers is not better or worse than the language of other social groups. In Italy today, there continue to exist many local vernaculars, all of which evolved from Vulgar Latin. The language that is today known as Italian developed in central Tuscany with the works of Dante Alighieri, who was writing in his native Florentine language. Dante, through his works of literature, is credited with standardizing the Italian language. This literary treasure, coupled with the fact that at this same time Florence held a political, economic, and cultural significance, all but ensured the establishment of this Tuscan vernacular, Florentine, to be the vernacular of what is now the official language of the Italian peninsula. That is, the Florentine vernacular had a linguistic cultural capital that conferred social status and power to those that spoke it and employed it in their writing. I claim that the linguistic bridge connecting the Latinx community in the United States is similar to what Dante refers to as la lingua nostra, or la nostra lingua. The vernacular he chooses to use in the Canto is a powerful tool to identify and preserve culture, just as today's language choice among Latinos serves as a tool to preserve and maintain theirs. In Canto 7, however, Virgil and Sordello, both being citizens of Mantova, become friends. As we read in this canto, they become friends because of this shared origin. In the previous canto, Dante had used this example of Sordello and Virgil's immediate friendship, based on shared citizenship, to go into a long diatribe against the political factionalism that, in Dante's day, afflicted most cities. And the cities he cites are Verona, the Montecchi, and Cappelletti, or the Montagues and Capulets of Shakespeare's fame. Sordello's tribute to Virgil unites Virgil's Latin and Sordello's Provençal as la lingua nostra. That's in Purgatorio 7.17. I agree with the meaning that lingua nostra references Latin as the mother tongue of Romance vernacular poets. Sordello's term embraces Latin and all its Romance derivatives, and regards them as one language, a patriotic nostra. In the words chosen in this self-presentation between Sordello and Virgil, Dante nods to his theories of linguistic internationalism. This act of linguistic internationalism parallels the political unity that Dante wants to represent with these two characters across 1,200 years, from the Roman Republic to the 13th century, that remain politically united because of their shared heritage. The language question is a metonym for the broader political problem. The rest of the canto focuses on Sordello's physical features of negligent princes who await purgatory. Descriptions such as the nasetto, or small-nosed prince of Purgatorio 7.103, versus colui dal maschio naso, he of manly nose in Purgatory 7.113, and the nasuto, or large-nosed man of Purgatorio 7.124. The distinct noses of Purgatorio 7 play into the discussion of hereditary and indirectly address issues regarding the construction of masculinity. Dante's theory of heredity states that nobility is not passed on from father to son, neither is damnation or political power, and masculinity as a stand-in again for the broader problem of inherited power and patriarchy. I hope you enjoyed this interpretation. Thank you for listening.